The United States military is often regarded as one of the world's premier fighting forces. Much of this is owed to a highly sophisticated and elite subset of the military known as Special Operations Forces. Granted, the use of small specialized units in war has not always been the obvious option. The majority of wars throughout history have been fought in traditional settings, large armies clashing on battlefields. However, the development of new technologies and staggering casualties in both World War I and World War II left nations across the world searching for alternative methods of waging war. Thus, the United States military formed the Frogmen, the first of many highly trained, specialized units. The creation of the US Frogmen marked a positive turning point in US military capability, domination, and evolution.
In the early 1940s, the U.S. military ran into an obstacle in its planning process: how to land their fighting forces on the beaches of Europe and Asia with the least number of casualties. They looked first to the Marines, then to the U.S. Army EODs, before realizing that the job would require specialized training and a special kind of soldier. In June 1943, at Fort Pierce, Florida, Lieutenant Draper Kaufman began training volunteers to become frogmen. The training consisted of intense physical requirements designed to weed out poor candidates. Also, there was reconnaissance, bomb disposal, explosives, small weapons, and a fairly new skill, small unit tactics training. The training culminated with
Hell Week. This week is as rough as it looks and nerve-wracking. Hell Week is designed to see how much you are willing to take to become a frogman. And we of the UDT want to know if you have what it takes to become one of us. Final scores are tallied, and we head for home.
the graduates were assigned to six-man Naval Combat Demolition Units, or NCDUs. The NCDUs were not obligated to follow traditional chains of command. One officer aboard a ship the NCDUs rode on bristled at their attitude. It seems that the men who have gone through training there get the impression they are in a commando outfit. In November 1943, Rear Admiral John Hall took command of the 11th Amphibious Force and assumed the responsibility of depositing the Army's 5th Corps on a landing site designated as Omaha Beach, nothing less than the most important operation in American history. The NCDUs would first demonstrate their extraordinary skill on the beaches of Normandy, France. Admiral Hall finished his story pretentiously. "If you courageously carry out your duties," he said, not dreaming what this unit would ultimately become, "your descendants will be proud of your bravery." When the men responded that they were ready, Hall's eyes dropped to the floor, and, deeply moved, he murmured, just above a whisper, "How do we get such truly brave and fearless men?" The NCDUs would go on to suffer a 52% casualty rate, 91 of the 175 men for the whole of the Normandy landings. The NCDUs would go on to further distinguish themselves in the Pacific theater, on the shores of Iwo Jima, Tinian, Saipan, Peleliu, among many others. After World War II, the NCDUs, along with all of the U.S. military's commando units, were disbanded. 5 years later, in the early 1950s, at the beginning of the Korean War, the U.S. military realized that they once again needed men like those that cleared the beaches of Normandy. After a rough start, a group of sailors and Marines thrown together and led by Commander W.B. Porter would take out a key rail line along the Korean coastline. Since not a single one of the U.S. military's commando-type units from World War II had survived disbandment, not the Raiders, not the Rangers, or even the amphibious Rogers, Admiral Charles Turner Joy's first action was to create some. The legacy of the NCDUs would set the standard for the underwater demolition teams, UDTs. During the Vietnam War, the UDTs had a limited role in several key missions and were completely phased out and redesignated as SEAL teams by 1983.
Starting in the Vietnam War, UDT units were integrated into larger SEAL teams. The next logical step in small unit evolution, SEAL teams relied on the aquatic know-how of their forefathers while specializing in areas other than explosive ordnance. SEAL standing for Sea, Air, Land, indicates this Special Operation Force's new ability to operate in all terrain. Training just as hard as the Frogmen of World War II, the SEALs became the small unit response to burgeoning U.S. security focuses such as the
war against terrorism
and the war on drugs. On June 6, 1962, President John F. Kennedy delivered the speech, Another Type of Warfare, at the graduation ceremony of West Point Military Academy, making public his political interest in using the military to combat foreign asymmetric threats and pledging the full extent of his administration to the advancement of the U.S. Special Forces community. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, the SEALs were responsible for some of the largest military tactical feats in history, ensuring U.S. Special Forces continued providing effective turning points in battle. On December 18, 1965, after Marine forces lost control of the Mekong Delta to the enemy in Vietnam, the River Patrol Force was formed and immediately instituted an Operation Game Warden, meant to regain control over the Mekong Delta rivers and waterways. Instrumental to the disruption of the enemy supply lines were the Navy SEALs, who expertly neutralized several high-ranking enemies that controlled Viet Cong supply lines. On the 20th of March, 2003, a Naval Special Warfare Task Group consisting of U.S. Navy SEALs and Polish GROM executed one of the largest direct action missions conducted in Operation Iraqi Freedom. The goal was to simultaneously take control of two offshore oil platforms, Mina al-Bakr, known as Maybot, and Khor al-Amaya, known as Kayat, and secure onshore pipeline support valves for each platform and their stations located on the Al-Fa Peninsula. By taking control of these targets before Iraqi forces could damage them, the group would avert a massive environmental disaster and preserve the only oil export capability in southern Iraq. Now, through hundreds of missions, thousands of perfect tide-turning decisions, the SEALs have suffered losses too. And criticism has always been present. In some operations, civilians were harmed. In one, a fellow American warrior was shot down by friendly fire. The SEALs and the U.S. Special Forces at large have suffered great accusation and criticism. Some U.S. officials claim Special Forces have been, and continue to be, a hindrance to foreign relations and the American diplomacy apparatus. However, it has been proven, time and again, that if anything, Special Forces are a strengthening asset and an extension of not only the U.S. intelligence community, but the Foreign Diplomatic Service as well. 1 month after the attacks on the World Trade Center, Operation Enduring Freedom was launched in Afghanistan and in the Philippines. In the Philippines, the Joint U.S. Military Assistance Group was formed to combat Abu Sayyaf. Unique to JUSMAG, the unit had Navy SEALs and U.S. diplomats working together. JUSMAG is often referred to as one of the most successful of the foreign anti-terrorism intervention groups. Specifically, during the Balakatan operations, a small 5-man task unit from SEAL Team 3 conducted strategic field intelligence work in 2004. Within 4 months, the special unit had successfully opened communications with key politicians in the Davao region and secured positive relations with the future president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte. Where U.S. Embassy and even CIA counterparts were stonewalled, the SEAL task unit produced actionable results within weeks. Ultimately, the unit's work on Mindanao resulted in the neutralization of several key ASG leaders and contributed to the systematic disassembly of terrorist movements in the Philippines. The evolution of the Frogmen, from their earliest beginnings as well-trained swimmers to expert small unit tacticians, was not without its trials. However, those trials and the extraordinary vision of a few special men allowed the Frogmen to have a significant impact on key battles during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
As the face of war took on a new shape, so too did Special Operations Forces. During the second half of the 20th century, the U.S. Navy SEALs turned the tides of countless American conflicts. Questions of the morality of asymmetric warfare brought the Special Operations community under political scrutiny. However, through the examination of their purpose, it is accurate to say the evolution of the Frogmen has provided for the greatest positive turning point in U.S. foreign diplomatic capability.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.